5 minutes before the webinar, which is great. So super well done. We are going to start the webinar in about 7 to 8 minutes. It's just that we give 2-3 minutes for the persons that are connecting. Well, we have people located from all over the world in about that they are connecting, and some places in regions in the world, the internet connections it's much lower. We have people from all over the world. Let me just start recording this presentation. This presentation is recorded, and we share it in our site. Start recording just in a few days from now. So people that is not get into the room, they can have access to it. So. Again, very welcome, everyone. I can see that we have so far 18 participants in the room. In the meanwhile, I want to ask all of you that you can write if you want to communicate with each other. On the left side of your screen, you have a chat box right here. And in this chat box, on the left side, you can write whatever you want. So you can also, it's a place where you can make your questions. You can write the questions that you have. Okay. In the meanwhile, I want to ask what we normally do, and I want to ask you all that I get inside the room, is that you can introduce yourself, saying your name, where you are connecting from, and your organization, so we can have a sense of the people that are connected for this webinar. So yes, go ahead and please introduce yourself while we wait the others to get into the webinar room. We are going to start the webinar in about 3-4 minutes, just to make sure that we give time for people to access the room. We can see that there are many people trying to connect at the moment, so just to allow them to get the access that they need, the time that they need to connect. Yasmin and Marcia, they are ready. They are listening to us at the moment, and they're going to join. They're going to start the presentations very soon. Hey, David, or David. It's connecting from Amman. Oh, no, he's connecting from Beirut at the moment, but he's based in Amman. Nice. Welcome to the webinar. Hey, Elsa, really nice to hear from you as well, from Jordan. Camila Stecker, you work for Handicap International in Lebanon. Welcome to the room. Say hello, Diane. Welcome to this webinar. Hello, Jorge Gutierrez. Welcome for this webinar too. Filippo Mancini. This name sounds very familiar for me. So very nice to have you here, Filippo. Hello, Diana Belay. Based in Geneva. Very nice, Elsa. That's connecting from Egypt. Maria or Marija, I'm sorry for the accent. I'm sure I'm not saying their names properly, but that is not that much I can do. But it's nice to hear that you are here as well. Many people from Lebanon, from Middle East in general. Many people, Zaina Hassan, connected from the Middle East, from Amman regional office. So there are many people from Jordan connecting here today, and it's really nice to see that. I hope that you guys know each other, and probably not, I hope so. If you don't know each other, from today, perhaps you guys can connect with each other, and because clearly you all are interested in the same subject. Natalia Anna Frontal is also based in Brussels and also from SOS Children's Village. Welcome, Anna Frontal. Hey, Cohen Van Pratt from Belgium, Red Cross. And yes, Cohen, I saw some message from you in our chat in the MHPSS.net, so it's nice to have you here. Thanks for joining. Hello, Julie from the UNICEF New York. We are at least in a close time zone. I'm connecting from São Paulo, Brazil. Hello, Jennifer, connecting from the UK. Hey, Peter, connecting from Ottawa, Canada. I think it's quite early for you, no? It's what, it's 9 o'clock in the morning? No, it's not that early. Hello, everyone. MSF people from Victims of Torture, working for Victims of Torture in Athens. Welcome, Gail. Look, we have someone from Taiwan. So it's, you are working with a World Vision project in the Middle East region. So I'm not sure, Duke, where you are based. If you are based in Taiwan, it's quite late for you. Hey, Grace, really nice to hear from you. It's really nice that you're joining from Nairobi. I lived in Nairobi for a few months, and it's a very special place in my heart. Welcome to this webinar. All right, people, so it's really nice. I want to welcome you again, you all again. So very welcome to this webinar. Invisible Wounds, the impact of 6 years of war on the mental health of Syrian children. We are starting the webinar precisely in 2 minutes, just to give a bit of more time that people are joining us, and then we start the webinar. This webinar will last an average of 1 hour. It will depend on the number of questions and answers that you have, but should not pass beyond 1 hour and a half for sure. At the meanwhile, you see, most of you, but only for the newcomers now that are joining the webinar right now, you have here on the left side of your screen, you have this chat box that you can introduce yourself, you can present yourself, where you are connecting from, and the work that you do. Let me see if that's better this way. And you can basically introduce yourself, and this chat box is where you will be able to connect with us and also make your question. So as you can see, you can hear all the presentation, you can hear all the presenters, but you cannot speak. So to speak with us at the moment, you can write your question during the webinar, so you don't need to wait for the end of your webinar. So just prepare your question, write your question, put here in the everyone box, and then the role of Ananda and myself facilitating here this webinar will be precisely to ensure that these questions are addressed to Marcia and Yasmin by the end of the webinar. So you can prepare your question, write in the everyone box, and at the end we are going to have this 20 minutes, half an hour time for questions and answers. All right, so let's start now. Marcia, if you can open your webcam. Great, thank you, Marcia. So once again, welcome to everyone in this webinar. We are extremely happy that you are able to join this webinar. This publication of the Invisible Wounds is a publication that as soon as it was up in our site, MHPSS.net, we approached Marcia and Yasmin because we thought that it would be super relevant to give more visibility and promote a space of a further discussion around this report, a very useful and at the same time very dramatic report. So we want to thank Marcia and Yasmin very much. They are going to, each of them, introduce themselves at the beginning of the presentation. And I will explain how it works. Each of them, they have around 15 to 20 minutes presentation. Ananda is also a member of our team, MHPSS.net team, and the two of us are the ones that are going to facilitate this webinar. Our role is basically to facilitate the communication between the participants and the presenters. And the presenters, if the participants, if you have questions, you can write the questions in the everyone chat box, and Anand and I will ensure that Marcia and Yasmin, they have these questions by the end of the webinar. So I just want also to say that by the end of the webinar, we're going to share an evaluation link for this webinar, which is extremely important for us. So we kind of insist that each of the participants here, they can access this link. It takes no more than 3 minutes, and this feedback is very, very, very important for us. Okay, so we're going to share by the end of the webinar the link directly to this evaluation. Yes, so I will now unmute you, Marcia, and thank you very much for joining. Let me put up your presentation. Hi, Marcia, can you hear us? Uh-oh, I can't hear you. Can you speak?
You can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. I almost had a heart attack, but I'm happy that we managed. All right.
I didn't do it on purpose, I promise.
I know. So I'm going to take me off here from the webcam, and the floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, obviously, I'm Marcia, and Yasmin will introduce herself in a minute, but we wanted to say thank you so much to MHPSS.net for giving us the opportunity to share our findings on this report, and we are really looking forward to having some good conversation and some good discussions, and also for us to pose some questions or thoughts to this very wide and very experienced field by the look of it in terms of people who are listening in, because we still have some questions and some reflections that we would value finding information out from others, and kind of forms of collaboration is always important for new ideas. But first off, I'm Marcia Brophy. I'm based here in Amman, in Jordan, in Save the Children's Middle East and Eurasia Regional Office, and I've been with Save the Children for nearly 2 years now. I'm their Senior Regional Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Advisor, a ridiculously long title, and I'm also a child psychologist by training. So I've worked in the mental health field for about 15 years now in different countries and different communities. And as Marcia said, today we're going to present our Invisible Wounds report, which we launched a couple of months ago, that looked at the impact of 6 years of war on mental health and psychosocial issues for Syrian children. In case those of you, but I'm sure looking at the list of participants, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who Save the Children is. That doesn't, I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but just people in the field probably all know different agencies. But for those of you who are listening in and are not sure, Save the Children is an international NGO, and we work very much around promoting children's rights, providing support and relief for children in developing countries. And we work across the mandate for development, as well as in humanitarian and emergency response. We were established in the UK in 1919. So currently we have a global network of roughly about 120 countries that we're working in terms of responses. And those of you who know us, we work across child protection, education, health, etc. For Save the Children, the Middle East and Eurasia Regional Office, we work across the list of countries below, so I'm not going to read them out for you. But it's rather a large region, I can assure you. And again, just for most of you attending this webinar, at least right now in the moment, I'm pretty sure you already appreciate and have a good perspective of the Syrian refugee response, both within the Middle East and Eurasia regions, but also across Europe. But just giving you a little bit of an updated map from, say, the children's context, and most of our work for inside Syria comes across 4 hubs where we called it cross-border working, of which my amazing colleague next to me, Yasmin, works for our Southern Syria cross-border team, but we also operate across from northeast Syria for Iraq country office. We operate in Turkey as well, and through Lebanon in terms of central Syria. So that's where our response is based at the moment, currently. And as I said already, in terms of the support that we provide around the Syrian refugee response, in a very broad top line for you, is around shelter and basic needs, education, child protection, MHPSS, obviously, which is the content of this presentation, and in terms of health and nutrition, particularly around emergency response for early childhood and infant feeding programs. What I also wanted to just share with those of you who may not know the details of Save the Children in so much detail and context is that it may seem like our 6-year report called Invisible Wounds was the first piece of MHPSS research that we did, but actually it's not. We began working, or have worked in PSS in terms of low-level specialised support for a number of years now in the region. From the start of the Syria response, and as early as 2014, before my time with Save the Children, a piece of research was conducted very much looking and asking to our field staff what they thought were the particular issues that they were facing when everybody started to realise, sadly, that the situation for Syria was going to be much longer and have a larger effect on many of the communities and populations that we work in. So the research was carried out in 2014, mainly desk review and field visits with consultations with our staff. And the main biggest concern that came out so strongly was our staff's concern and anxiousness around working with children with far greater mental health needs than before, and also that the volume, the extent, the size of the population that we were working with, it wasn't just a few, a minority who were facing mental health problems, it was actually now getting towards significant numbers. I wanted to also share with you then a follow-up piece of research in 2015 and 2016, 2 different pieces, with maybe for some now, again, thinking about who the colleagues are listening here and looking at your names there, many of you will not find it as a surprise that after a few years in terms of being inside Syria and facing this protracted conflict, a number of the children were facing and talking about very horrific experiences that they were witnessing daily and how that was impacting on their everyday lives. In terms of our publication around childhood in the shadows of war, again, we looked at besieged areas in particular inside Syria. And it wasn't just an MHPSS lens that we looked at, but as you can see there, children were faced with illnesses and dying through lack of medical care and adequate health care. Families having to cut and ration the amount of food that they were having per day, so therefore high levels of malnutrition. And parents, again, very strongly telling us that they were observing significant and very worrying behaviour changes in their own children. Which brings us up to speed in terms of now the report that we launched a few months ago. And I wanted to give you a little bit more detail than the headlines, and also just to show you, obviously, we do have the report and you can download it off our website if you want to read in more detail. But for the space of time here, I wanted to give you some of the details. So for this piece of research, we actually spoke to our staff and our partners working inside Syria. And we trained them, and they then in turn interviewed up to 458 children and adolescents and adults inside 7 of Syria's governance. The locations and participants were selected on the areas where Save the Children and our partner organisations are operating. And they're mainly in opposition-held areas, including several besieged and hard-to-reach locations. And I think it's important to give you that context. So when we're talking about the findings, also one thing to share with you is around our conclusions are largely based on the experiences in families in these areas, but we also spoke to experts who were in government-held and ISIS-controlled areas. And although we didn't actually manage to speak and use questionnaires and focus groups with the children and parents themselves, we spoke to practitioners and experts in those areas, and they mirrored and talked about similar trends and similar issues that we found in our direct research interviews. So I'm just kind of flagging that up so you can keep that in mind as we go through the findings of the research. The research took place from December last year to February this year, and we looked and spoke to adolescents in the age of 13 to 17 years of age. It was roughly 60 girls and 95 boys, and for the parents and caregivers, we spoke to 159 parents and caregivers, 61 of which were female and 98 were male. We also conducted then 17 focus group discussions with a specialist on site here in Amman, with most of them taking place over Skype and Zoom, with our facilitators, our partner staff, working with the children directly in those locations that we're working in. And we conducted 17 focus groups, which was about 125 children. And the age ranges that we fell into for those focus groups was 5 to 7, 8 to 11 years of age, 12 to 14 years of age, and 15 to 17 years of age. And where appropriate, based on consultation with our partners who are working and operating inside Syria, some of those groups, those focus groups, were actually segregated in terms of gender as well. So some of the key findings that I've summarised here for you from the report, maybe unsurprisingly, but the biggest source of fear that children and caregivers very articulately spoke to us about was this overwhelming fear of being unsafe. And with children from the focus groups and 84% of the parents in the interviews and discussions talking about this. So any kind of associated sound, the shouting, aeroplanes overhead, were enough to trigger very extreme emotions and behavioural reactions in the children, including even in the focus group discussions when we took them on. So for some, there was a loud door bang, which was nothing to do with the ongoing conflict, but the children responded in such a frightened and scared manner. It was evident in terms of it's just at the forefront of their minds constantly in terms of noises and sounds, and a preoccupation of death and feeling unsafe. We also, when we did our focus groups, the children talked about, and the parents also talked about, suffering frequent nightmares and having difficulty for fear of sleeping. So fear of not waking up came through as a particular strong theme as well. We all know, as mental health or health professionals, there are significant long-term consequences for sleep deprivation. Everything from including from risk of psychiatric illness to long-term health problems. So this is an ongoing issue that we try to raise in this particular report. Looking at another theme around shattered education, one of the biggest impacts that children and adolescents really clearly spoke about was the loss of education, the loss of opportunity of going to schools, of going and having that normality of being able to play with your peer group, to be able to share stories and games, but also a lack and hope of what will happen in the future without that opportunity of having an education, an ongoing education, what will happen to their futures. And they spoke about that in a very strong and loud way. And for us to think as practitioners, what does this mean? A generation of uneducated and isolated children who are denied the opportunity to learn and socialise as children should. What does this mean as we move forward, even after 6 years? And when we launched the report, on that date, more than 4,000 attacks had happened on schools inside Syria, which, as we calculated, was almost 2 a day. Another theme was around, as we name it, the end of childhood. So adults in particular, our staff, as well as caregivers and parents that we spoke to, highlighted the rise in numbers about young boys being recruited into armed groups, but also having to take on the burden of finding financial support, so taking on jobs, whatever they may be, to be able to financially support your family or find food for your family. Young girls, it was highlighted in terms of their anxiety and their fear in the family, as well as the young girls themselves, about safety issues, that protection mechanism, a coping strategy perhaps, was for children as young as 12 to be married off. So these are all particular issues. And the last part around families being torn apart, clearly there are issues long-term around separation, loss and arrest of family members. And we all know, again, from a psychology perspective, that being part of a stable family unit, whatever that family unit may be, is a very strong protective factor to ongoing mental health issues and a sense of well-being for children. 77% of the adults who we spoke to reported that children have lost one or both parents in their community. And the level of stress and anxiety, and as some described it, depression in families, was also seeing a rise in domestic violence in the home as well, which can also be seen if we spoke about it at length and kind of thought about it. It could be seen as another indicator of the mental health distress that parents and caregivers are obviously having to face themselves. We didn't go into that detail in the report. We don't want to make too big inferences from the evidence that we found, but I'm happy to discuss that with any of the participants if they wish to. So moving on again then. So our research highlighted significant behavioural changes and psychosomatic symptoms in the children. In the worst case scenario, adults reported knowing that children were turning to substance abuse, that there were more frequent reports around different forms of self-harm and even attempted suicide as a way out, as an escape mechanism from the daily ongoing onslaught of this conflict and living in these circumstances. We clearly heard also from children as well as the parents, more children were exhibiting high levels of aggression. Children were increasingly bedwetting or suffering from involuntary urination, whether it's in the classroom or in public, regardless of whether there was a loud noise or something they witnessed, that this was happening involuntarily. Also, parents talked about the loss of ability of speaking or speech impediment. So children were in some ways losing their voice, whether it's selective not wanting to talk, or just through the traumatic experiences that they were facing. And again, many of the children in the focus groups, when asked about the things that they wanted to remove from their lives, many of them talked at length about the pain that they felt in their body. So they felt pain in their head, their chest, their hands. They felt difficulty in breathing day to day and at night time, and it woke them up. And some of them also talked about sometimes the loss of movement in their limbs. So some of the statistics from the Invisible Wounds report, as I've already kind of said, 49% of the children regularly talked about having feelings of grief or extreme sadness. 78% of them having these feelings most of the time. All of the groups, as I've already mentioned, talked about the loss of education and how this was having a huge impact on their life. And I've already touched on the domestic violence. Half of the interviewees that we spoke to had talked about domestic abuse on the increase. So all of these particular issues have an impact, obviously, in terms of what a mental health response would be. And I just want us to reflect on the fact that in some regions of more than 1 million people, interviewees said that there was just one professional psychiatrist per region. And I'll let Yasmin in a moment talk more about the kind of response that we actually have and the limitations and challenges that we have in that. But one thing I also want to kind of raise with you is that 1 in 4 of the children that we spoke to said that they rarely or never have a place to go to, or someone that they trust, that they can talk to when they're feeling scared, sad or upset. And again, from the mental health practitioner's perspective, that's an incredibly important finding and a way in for us to be able to try and support children and adolescents in this moment of severe distress, providing a safe space that they can come to and talk to people is incredibly important. even if it's not of a more specialized psychological therapeutic approach. Having that safe space has a really strong protective factor, as we know again from previous research globally, to support a child's mental health and long-term outlook. So that's a finding that I wanted to flag here in this research. So I'm not going to read out the whole list here, but for some of you, this won't be surprising. Obvious things like fear and anxiety, depression and feelings of isolation, as I just touched on, constant negative thoughts and feelings. From the 2 previous years' research that we did, this particular report started thinking more about, and parents and caregivers and our partner staff talking about, more and more young people talking about and showing suicidal thoughts and an increase in other forms of self-harm behaviour. Particularly from the young adolescents that we spoke to, they talked about a feeling of loss of identity. Who were they? Where were they in the world? What was the future going to hold for them? And a hopelessness about the future, which again is a huge risk factor for long-term mental health. Regardless of what they're facing in the here and now, that hopelessness will have a huge impact long-term on their outlook and their engagement with the world. So one thing we tried to do, and what I want to raise here, and I'm hoping this will work. We didn't actually test this, Marcia, so I'm going to see if this will actually work here. I want to show you a short YouTube clip. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Maybe I won't show it because I'm conscious of time. There's a really good YouTube clip that you can take from this slide here that talks very articulately about toxic stress, and it's based from Harvard University researchers. This slide now that I'm showing you tries to capture it, maybe not so articulately as the researchers themselves, so apologies to anyone from Harvard University if you're listening. But basically what we wanted to do in this report was more clearly articulate the range of different mental health and psychosocial support issues that children and adolescents, and obviously their families, are facing. We felt that maybe previous research had focused too much and too limited on PTSD as a buzzword to use in research or report findings, but also that in terms of research, for us, intuitively, it doesn't make sense to talk about anything in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, when children and families and communities are still in the middle of all of these traumatic experiences. There is no post yet for any of them. So what we wanted to do is articulate in a more clear way the level of toxic stress. So toxic stress is something that, as I said, Harvard University and other researchers are looking into, where they clearly show the link between being faced with a high level of daily exposure to traumatic events, builds up and has a huge negative impact in terms of the brain makeup, shall we say, in terms of our synapses, in terms of the connections, in terms of how we, as young children and youth, how they are developing cognitively, as well as emotionally, as well as in terms of memory, etc. So the daily exposure of toxic stress is a build-up. The traumatic events that they're facing or witnessing or hearing about daily has a toxic response in terms of their mental health outlook, as well as long-term impact in terms of their physical health. And the experiences that we think that the children in Syria are facing is a key issue around this kind of toxic stress focus. The long-term mental health outlook, because I know this is an MHPSS report and webinar. So if we think about the daily exposure and the kind of traumatic events that Syria's children have to endure, it will probably give rise to long-term mental health disorders such as major depressive disorder. It will also have an impact in terms of separation anxiety disorder if we think about the level of loss and separation that they're facing. Anxious disorder or over-anxious disorder. And later down the line, as and when this conflict ends, yes, maybe then we can talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. But right now, for us as Save the Children, we think that there are other mental health issues and psychosocial support issues which would be more helpful for us to be discussing as practitioners rather than PTSD. I'm going to hand over now, actually, and ask Marcia. I have 2 slides that will finish at the end, but I'm going to hand over to Yasmin to talk more clearly about and give you examples of some of our work actually in South Syria, in southern Syria. And I'm going to pass over the headphones as well because we had some technical difficulties.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcia. I will try right now to upload your video. It should be, let me try it for 30 seconds. It should work. And then we can show the video to everyone. Here you go. It's coming in 20 seconds, maybe. Thank you very much. At the same time, all the participants, if you have questions related to Marcia presentation, I will ask you to write your question on the everyone chat box. And then we are gonna make the questions to Marcia and Yasmin by the end of their presentation. So the video is almost over, so we should be able to see it anytime. Yeah, it's already uploaded, it's converting now, and it will automatically show right now.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Thank you very much. Yasmin, do you want your slides up, or we go back to Marcia's final two slides?
Your
slide up.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia.
Okay, just a second.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Yasmin. I'm a mental health and psychosocial support specialist with Save the Children, and I am a clinical psychologist. So welcome for all the participants, and thank you for Marcia for the presentation. So as Marcia said, I'm going to talk more about our mental health and psychosocial support interventions inside Syria. So based on the needs, I mean the ongoing needs after the Syrian crisis, Save the Children is trying to put all these needs into their intervention, and I'm talking here about the mental health and psychosocial intervention. So I'm going to share with you a bit about our strategic framework for Syria. So it goes under the umbrella of Save the Children strategic framework, like the overall framework, which is to work in partnership with local Syrian non-governmental organizations and international community to ensure that children in Syrian crisis survive, learn, and are protected. So this goes directly, as we said, under the overall umbrella of Save the Children strategic framework. So I'm going to show you, oops. Okay, so as you can see now, this is like a simple map on like Syria and the locations that we are working in. So basically, and Marcia mentioned that already, that we are working through access points. There are 4 access points actually. So the orange is like our access point in Turkey, which is the northwest Syria, managing northwest Syria, and then the green one is Iraq, northeast Syria. From Lebanon, we are managing central Syria, and on the south, we are managing southern Syria from Jordan access point. So we have responded out in southern Turkey and Lebanon since 2013, out from Iraq as of 2014, and from Jordan as of mid-2015. In those 4 access points, we work with 25 different partners, Syrian partners, while direct implementation remains only from northeast Syria, which is from Iraq. But for the other 3 access points, we do remote management for our project. I'm going to talk more like in details into our psychosocial and mental health programming. So Save the Children is using a range of structured and non-structured activities that are provided to our partners, and we train them, we support them in into the implementation of these activities. So mainly, we are working with the partners to be able to provide activities that are making the beneficiaries, like children and their caregiver, their parents, feeling calm, safe, hopeful, having a sense of self-worth, providing them with problem-solving skills, a sense of social connectedness and belonging, and trying to reduce the feeling of helplessness, depression, anxiety, anger, and all the negative feelings that are a result of the crisis. We are trying as well to build these activities on community-based approach and individual-based approach. We are developing and piloting simple PSS activities that are based on researches and evidence-based alongside with manualized current PSS activities we are rolling out in Syria. So we are aiming at integrating the MHPSS services into our main areas of intervention, which are the child protection, education, child poverty and health, and nutrition. Just to mention that in developing these psychosocial activities, we are trying to inline the activities that are developed with the interagency standing committee guidelines, and also the minimum responses during emergencies. So as most of you know, I think this is the famous pyramid of IASC. I'm showing it just to ensure like where Save the Children is working now in Syria in terms of MHPSS. We are like looking at the top of the bottom of the pyramid. We are working in the layer 2 and 3, which are the strengthening community and family support, and level 3, which is more specialized, the focused person-to-person or non-specialized supports. So these are the main layers that we are working, or our activities are within. So talking about the 4 access points in general, we work closely with our partners inside Syria to integrate the psychosocial support, as mentioned before, with our different intervention areas. So mainly with child protection, within our child protection programming. So we have been supporting our Syrian partners inside Syria to run and monitor the child-friendly spaces, where children simply can do their main role in life, which is play, and participate in either non-structured or structured supportive activities. We've been supporting our partners as well and their parents by providing positive parenting skills and support sessions to enhance their positive coping and their well-being, because several children believe like we are working mainly with the children, but we always include the caregivers and parents in our activities, as they have a very main role in their children's life. So if they have a good well-being, their children will have a good well-being as well. We've been doing supporting our partners in doing community and outreach activities to provide with psychosocial activities to children in remote areas who cannot come to our child-friendly spaces. So our outreach and mobile team go and reach to the doorstep of these children. We've been supporting our partners as well to do some referring for some cases of the children or caregiver who attend our activities and who are in need for more specialized MHPSS support. And they have been referring them to group or individual counseling sessions. We have done that through partnering with a mental health organization, Syrian one inside Syria. I'm going to talk more now about our MHPSS program inside southern Syria, which is managed from Jordan access point. As you can see on the screen, this is like a part of the Syria map showing only the southern part of Syria. These are our locations in Dar'a and Quneitra. We have more than 25 locations providing with PSS activities in Dar'a and Quneitra. We operate, as we mentioned before, through partners. We have we have now partnership with 3 partners in Dar'a and Quneitra to operate these activities. These are some pictures that I wanted to share with you. These are recent pictures actually from some of our activities inside Syria. So some of the activities, as you can see, are being implemented inside the child-friendly spaces. And we have been using approaches that are developed by Save the Children, like, for example, HEART, which is healing and education through art, and also child resiliency programs. We plan and conduct recreational activities, which is the free play for the children in the safe spaces. We do community and outreach work and how to plan and conduct activities in different areas like schools, community institutions, etc. Parents and caregivers support sessions to reduce daily stress and tension and provide them with new skills, as mentioned before, in coping and managing the different stresses. I'm going to also talk a bit about the training and the capacity building that Save the Children is currently providing with their partners. So according to the situation now, we are providing with the training and the capacity building remotely because of the border cross restrictions. Training plans are developed after discussions and consultations with our partners to take into consideration their current needs and the current context, because they understand better what's going on and what are the gaps, what are the needs. We do continuous remote monitoring for the partners' activities, like day-to-day activities in the field, to ensure the quality implementation. Partners' staff care, the psychosocial well-being is taken into consideration when planning capacity building and the training. We focus also on helping the staff deal with day-to-day stressors during their work with the children and caregivers to enable them to gain the needed skills to manage the stressful situation during the high spikes in conflicts, using mainly the psychosocial first aid, main principles, grounding techniques, and breathing relaxation exercises. My last slide is about challenges, and I know that all of you can imagine how remote management is difficult, of course, and sometimes even the face-to-face implementation is difficult. So how about remote management? It's very complicated. So basically, the first challenge is being remote. I mean, we are very far. We only communicate via phones, Skype. Internet connectivity is a problem inside Syria as well. So a lot of things are delayed. A lot of calls are delayed. So all of this is a challenge for us. Training and being done remotely is also a challenge. So it's very difficult. I mean, for me as a psychologist, I need to observe. I need to see, the body language of the people in the room, and eye contact is very important. So during doing and conducting remote training, it's very difficult to do all the psychologist stuff inside the room because we're doing it via Skype. Emergency settings, as all of you know, I'm sure all of you have been working in the field for a long time, and you know how staff members and volunteers working under stress, under continuous pressure, security constraints, being confronted with horror, danger, threats every day can be really demanding and affecting the staff psychosocial well-being. So I've been always thinking of this, actually, that the staff who are providing children with the psychosocial support are themselves under stress. So they are more or less facing the same traumatic experience, and they might be traumatized themselves. So this has been a challenge for us as well. So yeah, this is mainly like the main things I wanted to share. And talking about trainings and capacity building, we've came up with an idea like to include all the needs and gaps for our partners into a training called Child Protection and Psychosocial Support Core Training, where it contains several topics addressing their needs. So it's going to start remotely for next week for 18 days for our partners in Syria. So this training is based also on their needs and all the address challenges that I've shared with you. So I'm going to go back, Marcia, to Marcia's two last slides to end the presentation.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Marcia.
Yasmin. It's super nice to hear your presentation, and it's impressive the efforts that clearly it's coming from the two of you for this work, and especially with giving so many challenges all over the place. Thank you very much for the presentation of the two of you. We have right now at least 45 participants in this webinar room. I don't know how many we have on
Marcia,
YouTube channel.
Can we go to Marcia's slide? Because we still have two more slides to finish.
All right, let me go back there because I was about to move to the question and answers. We have many questions here, so let's move back. And let's go to the slide.
I'm sorry, I'll be super quick. Super
No,
quick.
it's fine. Take your time.
I want us to have plenty of time for discussion. I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of we had a whole list of different recommendations at the end of the report, and I just wanted to highlight a couple that I would be really happy to hear thoughts from the participants here. One of them was, I know globally we are at a crisis point financially in terms of humanitarian aid, but one of the things that we really reflected on in terms of this particular context and an ongoing challenge, even literally yesterday writing yet another funding application for Syria, is the time constraints in terms of funding. If we truly want to make an impact, a positive impact in children and adolescents and families' well-being and mental health, then we need to be strong in our voices to ask for much more longer-term funding of our projects. A 6 months to 12-month project, or sometimes even shorter, just is not substantial enough for us to be able to try and make an impact, particularly when and if there's any donors on here or going to listen to it in future, really love to carry on this conversation with you. If you then ask us to evaluate the impact of our projects, particularly around MHPSS or wellbeing, for me, and I hope some of the practitioners here listening, to me that seems quite crazy as a request, that working in this context, mental health programs need to be far longer and far more substantial to be able to make an impact in terms of people's lives and their mental health and well-being. Also, we do know that given, say, a hierarchy of needs and how funders approach different areas of work, we know that mental health and PSS support comes down much lower in the food chain, shall we say, and education and child protection, et cetera, are much higher up. And I would like to just pose the question around, no matter how great we put into an education project, and we do obviously education projects ourselves as an organisation, so no matter how great we train our teachers, no matter how amazing and exciting we make that learning space, and we deliver a fantastic curriculum, if the child is facing any kind of mental health or psychosocial support issue, they're really going to find it a challenge, if not impossible, to be able to concentrate in a classroom and learn anything. So what we need to do, and what we are ongoing and trying to do within Save the Children, is integrate our education and MHPSS projects more closely. MHPSS projects need to take place in all of those educational settings that we work in, because it's a prime location for teachers and support staff to be able to support the children and to aid and support their education by learning and knowing more about mental health responses. We have a whole list of other recommendations, as I said, but I wanted to share those two in case that gave an appetite for any of the participants to ask further questions or have a discussion on it. And I also wanted to raise this one that we are genuine about as well. The opportunities for collaboration. So the children by itself cannot obviously solve all of these particular issues. But as agencies together, we know the long issue of either duplication or overlap in the field, or then gaps. And, you know, a real request for us to have this opportunity to talk, and, you know, live now and after this webinar, to help and think creatively about how do we really improve strong functional systems for referral inside Syria for children who need more specialised mental health support. How do we help identify professionals who could assist in these cases without overburdening themselves, because we know that they're facing the same traumatic experiences potentially as the children and youth are. But also, how do we honestly address and build national capacity long term? We know potentially that there are existing regional shortage of mental health professionals, particularly for child and adolescent response. But in a protracted situation where we, as Yasmin very clearly said, we face challenges even training people remotely. What can we do now as agencies combined to genuinely build that national capacity long term? Because it's going to be needed. Even if the conflict finishes tomorrow, that mental health support is going to be needed. And that's something that we really are keen to talk about with other agencies or individuals. So they're my pleas for conversations or questions. I'm sure maybe you have others. We would like to thank you again. And I'm not sure how you want to do the questions, because we're going to share this headphone and speaker.
Thank you so much, Marcia. It's a very thoughtful presentation, and the points that you have raised, they are so relevant, and not only relevant for Syria for sure. My experience also shows pretty much the same level of challenge, not level of challenge, but kind of challenge, I would say. Regarding the questions, we have many of questions here, which is extremely interesting, which shows how much the presentation of the two of you really interacted with the audience at the moment. I can already anticipate for all the participants that we are really sorry, but it's very likely we won't be able to make all the questions, but let's see how far we can go. Well, to help here, because you guys are dividing one headset, I will start with you, Mark, so that you have the headset already. If you can see on the presenters tab of your computer, those are all the questions we had so far, but I read it to you as well, some of them that you can pick up from there. Well, the first question that I would start here from the several questions, Marcia. This question from Tanya. What, if any, community-sourced or based coping mechanisms were reported or mentioned by the children parents? By community-based, I mean organically developed without external support for source.
Yeah, it's a really important issue. And obviously, any kind of community-based, organic, as you use that word, mechanism that could be put in place is really important around mental health and well-being. Given the questions that we were asking, we didn't actually have that addressed in the research. But I'm sure if you wanted to communicate with us, we can find that information outside of this report. But the particular questions in this report, we didn't ask for those particular mechanisms. But we do know in certain locations, for example, with older youth, we do know when we've done some particular PSS activities with them, that their own confidence has been re-galvanized, shall we say. I don't think that we magically built their confidence from scratch, but we maybe supported them to feel empowered and to have a sense of control over their lives. And they have begun to develop their own kind of responses and their own groups and their own sessions, where it might be a kind of drama or a play or a show that they're putting on for themselves. So there are certainly community mechanisms in place, which I can talk to you at more length, Tanya, if you want to message us.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Another question for you: what kind of interventions have been proved as very effective, in your opinion, if you think that child adaptation programs could work? It's Samat writing from Turkey.
Okay, in terms of our perspective at the moment around the interventions that are working, we are, as Yasmin very helpfully put up the interagency pyramid, we at the moment are still sticking very firmly within layers 2 and 3, where we are providing focused, non-specialised PSS support. So by that, and I'm trying to use my language very clearly and carefully, because I know there's so much confusion within the MHPSS world, and we all add to it with jargon and extra terms, but by that I mean we don't want to provide highly specialised therapeutic individual sessions at this stage, because we think, based on the interagency MHPSS and emergency guidelines and through our own knowledge, as both of us are psychologists and we have another couple in the team, that intervening on that really high level specialised mental health support at the moment would potentially could do more damage long term, because the children are still in the middle of it all. They're not in a safe space to start exploring their emotions at a great level and have long drawn out counselling sessions. So for us, we've firmly made the decision at the moment, given this current context, we work on a non-structured, semi-structured PSS intervention. So for example, one thing that we talk about in our report is HEART. It's a art-based program, which we've used in many other contexts, but for this particular context, it's very easy for us to train our partner staff remotely on this, so that they have full confidence about how to use a whole range of different art techniques, where we allow the children to have a very safe space that they can begin to start to express their emotions. So we don't draw into any stories. Our partner staff do not ask any questions to draw out the history of it, or what are they drawing and why are they drawing and how they feel about it. The children and this youth have full control over what they express and how they express it, whether it's through music or movement or through artwork. And for us at the moment, that's a really, really helpful safe space for them to begin to process and reflect on what's going on in their lives, and to begin to engage with the heavy emotions that they are facing and feeling daily. So for us at the moment, that's what we're finding that's a good intervention.
This is great. And thank you very much, Marcia. If you go to the presenters tab, the two initial questions that they are quite close. The first one is, how did you determine who had PTSD and toxic stress? Usually this should be determined by professional psychiatrists, psychologists, and you had locals collecting data. I don't know if you can clarify a bit of it. And also, what is a near question to this one is, would you say that a new term is required, like conflict-induced toxic stress? These would all, for those working in the field, to properly address the symptoms. If you can get these two questions ago.
Really interesting question. So I can't see who wrote the question for the PTSD and toxic stress. So to reassure you, I'm a child psychologist, trained. Yasmin is a psychologist. We have another psychologist within our Southern Syria team, and we have another regional psychologist as well. So between ourselves, we are the people that would make those kind of particular differentials between what symptoms we're seeing and what we would want to call them. But what I want to point out in this research is, we didn't diagnose, and nor do we say or give diagnosis in this report. What we're trying to do is reopen the terms, the language, the dialogue that we as MHPSS practitioners use, and to help articulate that to funders and to non-MHPSS practitioners, whoever they may be, in terms of what we're facing. Because what we felt was too much of the work prior to this report focused too solely on PTSD and labelling people with PTSD. And whoever asked that question, you're completely right. To make that diagnosis, you need to be a qualified mental health professional, normally a psychiatrist, or it can be a medical doctor. We found that too many people, whether they were mental health practitioners without that background, or certainly the wider audience, the wider world interested in Syria and an MHPSS perspective, were making those diagnoses. We're talking about children and communities in terms of that everybody had PTSD. What we're trying to say in this report is, we need to think about it in a broader set of mental health terms. Do not fixate on the term PTSD, because they're in the middle of it still. It's not post anything, so we don't feel that we can make those diagnoses yet. We don't diagnose anyone with toxic stress, but what we're trying to do is bring that as a term to, as I said, widen that dialogue, widen the terms and information that people talk about, so that we can articulate it better to funders and also from a programmatic level. If we only talk about PTSD, it tends to move people to that top layer, that most specialised support that we can offer on that MHPSS pyramid. And we know that we can't do that because there are not enough highly specialised mental health professionals and practitioners inside Syria or even in the bordering countries. So broadening out the issue to say about toxic stress and the broader mental health issues that they may face long term, it allows us to think more creatively about what could be and should be more appropriate as our here and now interventions to support people. So I hope that answers that question. Long-winded, I'm sorry. But I hope we can see quite passionate about that. We feel quite strongly about that one. But also then there was a question on the, shall we call it conflict-induced toxic stress? I'm not so sure. I think there's too many terms that are being floated around already in the MHPSS world. I think at the moment, let's stick with toxic stress and let's understand it a little bit better. I do think that that this has been the most comprehensive piece of MHPSS research with children and adolescents inside Syria. So before we start adding extra terms or labels, let's try and investigate this a little bit more as a collaborative process. So we want to hear from other mental health professionals, even if it's small pockets of research that's being undertaken inside Syria. We want to keep this dialogue open so that we all learn. So me personally, maybe not a Save the Children perspective, but me personally, I wouldn't like to add conflict-induced toxic stress at the moment. Let's go back and talk to the researchers who started looking into this as well. So Alexa Chung is forward on the report as well, and she's the key person at Harvard University who's been leading on this research. But for me, I wouldn't add anything else to that term at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marcia. I'm sorry that we are making a lot of questions to you, Marcia. I will move not yet, just one more question to you, and then we move to Yasmin.
She wants to answer.
There are many questions here for her. Don't worry, just to avoid this removing piece. So, what would be your what do you think about the previous PSS background of the local professionals, the MHPSS background of local professionals and their vision about MHPSS? And also, if you can explain a little bit more on training on parenting that has been taken care by Save the Children. And then we move to Yasmin.
Sure. Yasmin can pick up the one about the background perhaps as well a bit on our partner staff. Certainly when we started working with the majority of our partners across all 4 cross-border operations, the level of MH or PSS knowledge was very low. So we started from scratch with them, everything from basic child protection and child safeguarding right through to what would look like a normal developmental journey for a child or an adolescent in terms of cognition, emotion, physical movement, etc. And then we started layering on information around PSS and our child-friendly spaces and what does it mean to live a PSS work. So we've been, I hope, methodical and have tried to do it in a step-like approach. That's not to say that our partner staff, they have been incredibly creative. They have a lot of amazing ideas and a lot of strengths and skills that they bring to this work. And their energy and their enthusiasm is phenomenal as well. And I know that Yasmin can speak very much about that because she's currently ongoing with more training with our teams. But across the 4 areas, the initial level of PSS knowledge was low and the skill set was low. In terms of the more specialised mental health sector, as I said, for actual working practitioners inside Syria, it's so few and far between. It's such a shortage. It's a real issue. So if we have children with more severe mental health immediate needs, we struggle sometimes to be able to know who to refer to, which is why I flagged it up here on my last slide. That's something that I think we should need to try and address. And this group on MHPSS.net are the perfect audience and group to try and think creatively about how we address this. And then very briefly I forgot the question, parenting programs. We are, as Yasmin already talked about, even though we're called Save the Children and our primary purpose is to work with children and adolescents, we absolutely support working with the communities and their family units, their caregivers, whatever that family unit may be. Because without supporting the mental health and well-being of those caregivers, as Yasmin already said, there is no way that we can truly make an impact long-term, a sustainable impact in terms of the child's well-being and mental health outlook. So we do a lot of work with the parents around helping them reflect and understand the levels of stress that they're going through and how they are facing distress, what they may be feeling in their bodies, their minds, how to deal with their own anger and frustration of the situation, how not to take that out on their children, which is a normal thing to do. So helping them recognise their mental health and PSS issues, giving them really easy, memorable coping skills, techniques, so whether it's breathing skills, grounding skills, etc., to deal with their own stress levels in that moment. And then that's mirrored in terms of how we work with the children. So we're giving key things, key messages, key skills to the parents and the children so that they work as a family unit, and it hopefully overlaps and there's some synergy there. And then many of the breathing skills, the techniques, the grounding techniques, etc., that we give to the family units, we also teach to our staff, to our partner staff, so that there's a flow there, that everybody has the same level of information and knowledge, and that we can all use those techniques to stay well in very extreme situations. So the families, the parents see it mirrored in the staff, so they feel confident that they can use it. The children see their families and our staff using the same techniques, so they're not shy or embarrassed to use it. And that way we hope that we can begin to also reduce, in some places, the stigma that's associated with MHPSS work and issues. So.
Thank you very much, Marcia. You can pass the microphone to Yasmin. So Yasmin, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, I just feedback. We are receiving a lot of feedback in how much people they are very much appreciating the presentation of the two of you. It has been a wonderful presentation, very informative, including the slides. So well done to the two of you. Thanks for the participants for this feedback.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. So if you feel free, Yasmin, in case you have any comment you would like to do based on the previous answers that Marcia gave, and then we have a few questions as well.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to comment on the parenting program. Last question. That there is very, let's say, tip that we provide our partners with when conducting parenting program is we're not here to teach the parents how to be a parent, because okay, we are giving them skills, we're providing them with more awareness on more positive parenting skills, etc. But we don't want them to feel that we are here to teach them how to be a father or how to be a mother, because if it's not done in a proper way, it can be really harmful for them. I know that after the crisis, a lot of mothers and fathers have lost the ability to be, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but, doing normal parenting as before the crisis. And they have lost a lot of skills with their children. They're not spending quality time with them as before and all this stuff. But we know that, but we don't want to give this impression that we are teaching them, okay, how to be a parent again.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. I know that many people there are also saying that they had to leave the presentation because they were expecting 1 hour webinar. And I want to encourage all the participants for the questions that you might still have. We share the link, the evaluation webinar link, and there you can also make your question, and we can collect them and then see the availability of Marcia and Yasmin to respond it in writing later. Okay. So a question for you, Marcia. In addition to this family, to a family as a strong protective factor, have you observed the other protective factors to victims for victims' mental health?
1 minute.
But no, that's for Yasmin.
Oh, it's you. You said Marcia.
Oh, sorry, Marcia. It's a very near
question again, Marcia, because I can't
Sure.
find it.
So in addition to family as a strong protective factor,
Yeah.
have you observed the other protective factors, for the victim's mental health?
Yeah, like the family is a very major protective factor, of course. We have the community itself. The child himself sometimes is a protective factor as well. Institutions as well, and education.
And the activities that you have for children, does it include the children with disabilities?
Oh yeah, this is actually one of the challenges that I might forgot to include in my slide. But we aim to include and integrate children with disabilities in our activities. We have a small number of them, but the problem that most of the child-friendly spaces that we have is very hard to be, physically accessible for the children due to the current situation. But we have like a small percentage of children with disabilities, physical disabilities, currently attending our PSS. We aim to include more. We are trying to figure out solutions for the accessibility. We target some children with disabilities with our mobile teams who go to the doorstep of the children and conduct activities there.
And Yasmin, if you could speak a bit about what you have perceived and identified as the need to adapt all the mental health and psychosocial support tools, activities, and jargons, considering the specific cultural and religious context in Syria. So, what would be the lessons learned you have, or even the advice you would have for newcomers with regards to the cultural and religious context and the local context?
So we're talking here about adapting our activities to the local context.
Yeah.
Things like social context, religion, etc. Of course, in our activities, like sometimes we have a manual with activities that is ready and nicely written, etc., evidence-based and everything, but it doesn't fit, for example, in the current social context, or religious context, etc. So we are trying, of course, not alone, but with the collaboration with our partners, because they know more in the field, to try to address all the context and to adapt some activities. Like even in our manuals, like ready set manuals, we sometimes adapt some of the activities to, to be fit to the current social and religious context. For example, separation of boys and girls, even at early ages, is done in our activities, because sometimes, like in other countries, it's okay, like to mix boys and girls, for example, under 12, like even under 12 in activities, but in Syria context, it's culturally not acceptable. So we design our activities, to fit these cultural contexts.
Thank you very much, Yasmin.
Marcia, there was I saw a question about self-care.
Yes.
Can I comment on that?
Absolutely, feel free. So let me just repeat the questions for the audience. It is, yeah, here. How did you practice the steps in general? They take care of your own mental health and avoid a re-traumatization, no? When the steps that are supporting, they are exposed to this very needed psychological aspect. So, yeah, feel free to comment.
Yeah, so self-care, I mean, like psychologist is exposed to, of course, hearing stories, difficult stories, and sometimes working under pressure. So we always, as psychologists, recommend self-care, psychosocial well-being, etc. I mean, it's being like a trend recently, and it was very much, being done through trainings, workshops, etc. And sometimes it feels simple, like, okay, take care of yourself or take care of your psychosocial well-being. But it's not as simple as this, because it needs skills, it needs practice as well. It's really not easy to take care of your well-being and to keep, this peace of mind. So with the staff, mainly our partners, we focus on that with them. As I mentioned in one of my slides, that they are already under stress. We try to provide them with some skills that they can practice themselves. Some of these skills are simple. We're talking about deep breathing exercises, relaxation exercises. We're talking about progressive muscle relaxation sometimes, and all these needs to be practiced. So we encourage them to practice these skills before, like even if they are calm and not under stress, so they are able to practice these skills when they are under stress or after the stress. It's sometimes complicated because, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes they need to take care of the children they are dealing with, and then they think about themselves. So it's sometimes really complicated for them, but with practice, they are getting much better.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. Well, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Marcia, one more thing on that. That we provide them with this space sometimes to debrief about difficult stuff. So I do listen to their stories if they have, if they face any difficult cases, if they've been in very stressful situation. So we do provide them with debriefing sessions if needed.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. How important it is to provide a supportive environment in this kind of work we do. Thanks for reminding us that. Well, I'm afraid that we have to start closing this webinar. What I'm going to do is to pass to each of you for your final comments, or in case you want to address any points that you feel were not able to address properly. And then I know that we still have a few questions, but we will encourage again the participants to put that on the evaluation, and then later on we will see if there is a possibility to get it answered back to you.
Well, me and Marcia are really happy with joining this webinar and being able to, talk about some of the stuff that we are doing, the research, the actual work on the field, and thank you for giving us this space actually to talk about this stuff and to share. We would love to hear your feedback, of course. And if you have any further questions, we are ready to answer later.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. It has been a pleasure to hear you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Let's pass to Marcia.
You can say nothing from me.
No, Marcia is fine.
So listen,
Thank you so much, guys. And genuinely, we are really open to collaboration. This is a huge issue for Syria and across the region. So if people want to get in touch with us directly or through yourselves, we would love to keep this dialogue going.
This is really nice, and thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. Well done for this important work. Thank you, everybody, all the participants in this webinar. So probably by next week, you should be able to share the link, the direct link for this webinar that has been recorded. Keep checking the site. Next week, we have a very important, it's not a webinar, it's an online consultative meeting related to the Sphere standards. As probably many of you might know, is that the Sphere project standards, the handbook is being revised at the moment, and there is an important consideration for MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support, for the 2018 Sphere project. And we are going to have a webinar. It's not a webinar, it's an online technical meeting, so it's going to be a different format with the persons responsible to write this chapter on MHPSS, or to include the MHPSS in the Sphere project. So we encourage everyone to register for that. To participate. It's very important. It's the way that we can really influence the future of many programs around the world, and in terms of including MHPSS. So it's a quite relevant meeting for that. And we are happy that MHPSS.net will be hosting this meeting. Yeah, so it's going to be next week on Wednesday, 2 p.m., the same time as this one. 2 p.m. UTC, so 24th of May, 2 p.m. UTC. And we always choose this time around 2 p.m. UTC because of we are able then to reach most of the regions. But I know that some countries will always feel somehow not so much included by the time zone. But, you know, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to be in other places at the same time in the world. So unless there are different specific topics that's more related to the East or to the West, then we adjust the webinar times for that. Please do get a moment to go to the evaluation link that Ananda has shared. And thank you so much once again. It has been a great presentation. And be careful, because we might invite the two of you again for other webinars. So that's how it works. It's a tricky thing that we do.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So we're going to close the room. And thanks a lot, Marcia and Yasmin.
Bye. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.